Well, hello everybody, it's Dr. Greg Barson again, and welcome to our second class on cardiovascular disease entitled Know Your Risks and Beat the Odds, which is, in this class, we're going to be talking about healthy support options. It's the following statement: none of this information has been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. And also a quick note on nutritional supplementation for the variety of different things that I'm going to be mentioning here that can be found on our virtual pharmacy at our website at healthquestforme.com. You'll find a lot of the same professional products that we recommend in our clinic. Just use that code number provided. Many are also available at local health food stores. And also just please note that any dosing information or suggestions is generic. Individual dosing should always be discussed first with any of your licensed healthcare professionals. So what is heart disease? Again, we're talking about, as a review from last time, we're going to limit this to discussion of heart attacks and strokes, as well as atherosclerosis and angina. And so here, let's get right into the risk reduction and support options. Quick review from class number 1. We talked about some statistics and the current problems with the standards of care. We defined what heart disease risk was, which is the previous slide or so just mentioned. Causes of heart disease really included diet, which was mainly from wrong carbs and fats, sedentary lifestyle, smoking, bad genes. Genetics really gets overplayed, but however, it is a component. Inflammation is the biggest thing, and that can be also from diet as well, but also infection and various toxins, free radicals and nutrient deficiencies. And then we talked about measuring your individual risks, and expanded lipid panel testing is routinely not done, but we feel should be, because it does uncover a lot more risks that are not uncovered alone with standard lipid panels. Looking at different lipoprotein particle size and densities, their inflammation, oxidation markers, and some gene markers. And then there's also a test that you can do to measure omega-3 fatty acid level in your red blood cells. So some support options: we want to talk about good fats. We want to normalize insulin resistance if that's there, and blood sugar balancing. There's enzymes, there's anti-infectives, there's blood vessel flow support, as well as cell membrane repair nutrients, fibers and antioxidants. There's standard lipid lowering agents in the nutritional world, and as well as anti-inflammatory factors. And a lot of these things are anti-inflammatory. So good fats and bad fats. Fats can be building blocks for tissue hormones, also known as eicosanoids, fancy name for these tissue hormones, and they're found in nearly every cell of the body, and they perform lots of functions. But the fats that we eat determine which eicosanoids that we make. Are we going to make eicosanoids, or these little tissue hormones that increase or decrease heart disease risk? So healthy heart fats include omega-3s like cold water fish and flax, also chia, hemp seed as well, and hemp oils. Grass-fed and finished meats. Grass-finished meats are the ones where the cows and the animals have eaten grass their entire lives, not just a certain percentage where you can still technically call them grass-fed. Sea buckthorn, olive, avocado, these are other omega fats. A lot of these are monounsaturated fats that are very heart healthy. Evening primrose and borage, unsaturated and unprocessed omega-6 sources, and they're actually healthy. Unhealthy fats include any of the conventionally raised meats, obviously fried foods and trans fats, partially hydrogenated oils, and all margarines. And to maximize good fat metabolism, let's say you're eating some of these good fats in your diet or in supplementation, you want to do some things that can really facilitate their metabolism. And that's going to be things like magnesium and zinc and B6, vitamin C. Maybe you're taking a good multi or a really good diet that has high potency sources of these things. And reduce the good fat roadblock. So if you eat a bunch of good fats, but you're drinking 5, 6, 7 cups of coffee every day, or way too many servings of alcohol, which is 3 or more, excessive sugar, insulin levels, or trans fats, those will block the metabolism of healthy fats that we put in our pie hole and don't eventually get to the promised land. So they end up turning to be bad guys. So your body doesn't produce omega-3s, hence we call them essential fatty acids, and you have to get it elsewhere. And here's a quote: I've heard that eating salmon is a good source of omega-3 fats. Are there other fish oils with good fats? And the answer is yes. This is just a standard panel that was done, but there's many, many other charts and graphs that depict this. The salmon is the highest at the bottom, also herring and anchovies and things like that. Tuna is too, but we got to watch out for mercury level and contaminants. So here's something from the National Resource Defense Council. From high mercury on the left down to the lower mercury on that second column to the right. But there's also environmental contaminants, so you want to be careful about some of those. So I don't like farm-raised salmon. They're typically higher in PCBs and dioxins. These are in other charts and references as well. You can find these online. Make sure they're from reputable sources. But wild salmon is a great one. Krill oil. It makes up the largest biomass in the world. It's the favorite food of whales. And it's a great source of omega-3, 6, and 9 fats, as well as something called phospholipids. And that's a phosphorus group hooked up to a fat. And why is that important? Because it helps get it into the cell more efficiently. And these little tiny small crustacean-y shrimp, they are very high in naturally occurring phospholipids. And they're also high in something called astaxanthin, which is one of Mother Nature's most premier antioxidants. It gives it that orangish color. It's also responsible for the pink color in salmon and flamingos and so forth. So we like to use a product called Krillplex at 2 a day. You can get that on our virtual pharmacy, and there's the code. And there's other sources as well. So virtual pharmacy, healthy fat and oils. And by the way, through the presentation, these aren't necessarily mandated to get on the virtual pharmacy, but these are just things that we know that have worked really well in our clinical practice. So we've oftentimes used and still do EFA Essentials. That's a balanced source of both fish and borage oil. Omega-3, 6, 9, which is a really fantastic pre-digested and emulsified form of lemon-flavored oil. Has no fish oil repeats or burps, especially great for pediatric use. Barlean's high lignin flaxseed oil, that's one of our favorites. You can get that on the virtual pharmacy, as well as any health food store should carry that as well. And also the Vega antioxidant omega oil blend. That's a variety of polyunsaturated fats from the omega-6 as well as 9 and especially omega-3 varieties. These are all found in the refrigerated sections. So there are some myths about this polyunsaturated fat. These are actually not so bad. So nuts and seeds and oils and legumes and monounsaturated fats as well. Olives and avocados and some of these things, hummus, and these are all heart-healthy fats, really, really healthy for you. And you can go back and review this later on if you'd like. So we also look at some other fat options. So what about some other omega-3 sources like flaxseed oil and flax seeds? And omega-3s in flax is a really high source of what's called alpha-linolenic acid. That's what we call a parent chain omega-3 fat. About 55% of flax is made of this form of omega-3. There's also some omega-6s and 9s in through there which are healthy and round out the equation. It's a great source of soluble and insoluble fiber too. The insoluble fiber is the stuff that's just good for bowel movements and regularity. Detoxification too, and the soluble fiber does some other stuff, also binds cholesterol and some other things. Lignans are a really nice little plant fiber that's found in through there as well with other beneficial interests. Note that this is a vegetarian source, so it's suitable for vegetarians, and about 3 tablespoons of the fresh ground seeds, and we always recommend them fresh. If they're already bought in powder form, a lot of times the oils are oxidized because they just are exposed to air very easily. But about 3 tablespoons of seeds equals about a tablespoon of the oil. Make sure it's organic only. If you're going to get your own seeds, grind them fresh in small batches. Store them in the refrigerator or the refrigerator or the freezer. Keep that oxidization down. Chia is another good source of soluble and insoluble fibers, and it's got about 64% of omega-3 fats. Wow, really high in antioxidants though. So this is maybe where it has a slight edge over omega-3s from the flax oil variety. Best if it's organic. It can be ground fresh daily, but it doesn't have to be ground, unlike flax. These things are more exposed. The cell membranes are not quite as tight and tough and rough on there, so our bodies can digest these more easily. Again, store them in the freezer. Try to get an airtight bag or Ziploc baggie. Tablespoon or 2 a day can be put in any of these sources. Is it better than flax? It's personal preference, really. I like people to get a blend of everything in if you can. If you just chew them up as a whole bunch in your mouth, they do kind of get stuck in your teeth a little bit, so you might want to put them in a smoothie or in some warm cereal. What are some other support options for the cardiovascular system? Well, vitamin E is one of the premier ones, and there's 4 different forms of tocopherols, we call them. There's alpha, beta, gamma. There's others, but gamma really makes a big splash. And there's tocotrienols. That's the other member of the vitamin E family. We call these the isomers, and there's actually 8 isomers of that. Here's some nice foods where they can be found. Avocados and raw nuts and seeds and some green leafies. Looks like a little bit of mustard greens there. Some olives, and this is annatto extract as well. Vitamin E, we talked about the different tocopherol types in through there. Alpha is the most common, but gamma is shown in some literature to be the most beneficial. But you want to get something that has all of these things in there if you can. Typical dose is going to be about 400 international units per day, but make sure you talk with your doctor if you're on any blood thinning medication, as it does have a little bit of a blood thinning quality. Here's some other foods with some vitamin E in through there. Here's a book that talks about tocotrienols, kind of the unsung hero of the vitamin E family, but it is found in most good quality natural whole-based vitamin E supplementation as well as some of those foods. What are some other support options? Well, we talked about sugar levels in the first seminar, as well as touched on it briefly here, and insulin resistance is a big problem. So insulin resistance, when our body can't really respond well to the sugar binding to those insulin receptors, and good old-fashioned cinnamon to the rescue. It's a wonderful aromatic spice that does help normalize insulin resistance to a degree. Also, fenugreek. I didn't put a picture of the fenugreek in here, but it's also really great. So fenugreek, the good old-fashioned spice, and cinnamon, really, really nice for insulin resistance or blood sugar imbalance. Now, what are some other support options? Well, we got to talk about some infection. Mycoplasma is a classic one that can make a lot of biofilms, like a lot of other infections can. And what you want to do is kind of consider natural anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial herbs. Here's some examples, like curcumin, the active pigment in turmeric, rosemary, basil, cinnamon, clove, oregano, garlic. All these things, they're strong. They can break up biofilms to a degree, but again, some of these have blood thinning qualities. Again, make sure you talk with your prescribing doctor if you're taking any of these things in high amounts. We also talk about, in the clinic setting, we talk about something called Interphase or Interphase Plus, which you can also get on the virtual pharmacy. Those aren't necessarily digestive enzymes. These are enzymes that specifically break up biofilms, which are the little polysaccharide sacs, we call them, that low-level pathogens can make and help evade the body's immune system. So that's how we can have a lot of these stealth pathogens, we call that, in the system. And when there is a lot of inflammation from infection or even from other sources, fibrinogen, which we call the pipe clogger, it's also can be in high amounts. And fibrinogen is the precursor for fibrin, which helps with our blood clotting mechanisms, but we don't want too much. So if that happens, you can look at blood tests for this. And I like fibrinolytic enzymes like these that I've mentioned right here. Some of those spices as well, omega-3 fats can also help, but you still ultimately have to look for infection and manage those things properly as well. Little contraindications down here again about blood thinning medications. Garlic, we've talked about that. Here's the active constituents called allicin and allicillin. There's also something called AHOE. It's also high in selenium and germanium. And this is really one of our favorite things. There's a product down here we have called Garlic 7000, which is a really nice enteric-coated one that's really high potency and reduces the odor. Turmeric or curcumin, we're getting into the specifics of each of them that we've mentioned earlier. Really powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. Also reduces LDL, or the bad guy, cholesterol oxidation. Again, remember from class number 1, not all LDL is bad. Some are worse than others. Typical dose, 500 to 2,000 milligrams per day with food. Some of these things can help enhance the absorption and assimilation of this, so you want to make sure you look for some of these things whenever you're going to be getting a curcumin or a turmeric product in. And we use Curcumisorb, which is one of our favorites for a variety of reasons. It's one of the more economical ones that really we've seen seems to clinically work really, really nicely. Guggul lipid. A good old-fashioned herb. It's actually a pitch from a tree. It's used in Ayurvedic medicine for countless millennia, and it's been having a really positive showing in the literature. And these are just two of them that I've listed, but there's many others that talk about it. It has a blood cleansing effect in there, as well as helping to balance with lipids. Typical adult dose, going to be 500 to 1,000 milligrams per day, which is usually a capsule or two, depending on the strength. We like to use one thing from Pure Encapsulations. It's to replace a Guggul extract. Pomegranate, the lowly pomegranate. We don't know about that as much in the West, but in the Middle East, this is a really big favorite fruit, and rightly so. It's richly deserving the reputation that it has. It's a great source of flavonoids and antioxidants, reduces bad guy LDL oxidation. You might want to consider eating a fruit or two or more a day, or the juice of that. Try to get it unsweetened if you can. Doesn't lower cholesterol, but there's some literature that shows that it might be able to help clear arterial plaque. We don't know exactly all the mechanisms that. We think it might be just of its naturally occurring antioxidants and flavonoids in there. Great source. Some blood flow nutrients. Now here's another option in there. We talked about some of these herbs too, but garlic, ginkgo biloba, bilberry, cayenne, ginger, and the amino acid L-arginine. These are all something to kind of open up the blood in the blood vessel tree, if you will, the circulatory dynamics, making sure the blood flow is open and patent and circulating to every place that it should be. We don't want to compromise the blood flow. That's certainly what plaque can do, and one of the options is L-arginine as well, like we mentioned earlier. It's a precursor for nitric oxide, that miracle molecule. It's a powerful vasodilator. Many people do have decreased nitric oxide production, especially those that are obese or smoking or diabetics. Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded in 1998 to a few U.S. doctors that discovered this. not L-arginine, but nitric oxide, by the way. And L-arginine, by the way, has been shown to, one, improve blood flow, we've talked about, reduce the incidence of strokes and blood clots, actually reduce hypertension and diabetic circulatory problems, and actually improve the outcome after bypass surgery. Wow, what a heavy hitter. Fiber, well, that's continuing on with our support options. We want insoluble fiber. This is wheat bran, some nuts and veggies. They act mainly as a bowel cleanser. The soluble stuff like oats and oat bran, beans, flax seeds, a lot of things like apples and whatnot, those potentially can reduce cholesterol and sugar levels for some people. But really a blend of both is good. We like around 25 to 30 grams a day for men, women and men respectively, at least 30% or more from the soluble sources. So just try to get a bunch of that stuff in. Not going to hurt you if you go over. If you do way too much fiber too quick and you're not used to it, you can get a little bowel gas as the gut ecology and the gut flora have to kind of learn to adjust to that. But start slow and you can always build your way up. It's really great for reducing inflammation in the gut. And again, inflammation, as we talked about, that gut-liver connection is a big thing. So antioxidants, again, just basic antioxidants. They reduce platelet stickiness, they protect cell membranes, they lower inflammation, and they can reduce the rate of plaque formation to a degree. Exceptional antioxidants include green tea extract. We really love Domacha tea, and you can get that in any place, I believe. Most health food stores will carry it. You can get that on their website as well. It's a little bit higher concentration of green tea, but you can also get capsules if you're not a fan of that. Krill oil, we mentioned that before. Mixed tocopherols, that really good quality vitamin E. Ubiquinol, which is the reduced form of coenzyme Q10. Really great for the heart and the blood vessels. Turmeric or curcumin, we talked about the forms. Resveratrol, derived from the plant Polygonum cuspidatum, also known as Japanese knotweed. This is where the French paradox comes in, where drinking a glass or two of red wine for some people may be good. Interesting enough, grape juice does the same thing. It's those dark purple skins in the grapes that afford it all that protection, and they're doing that in Mother Nature's world to protect itself from UV light and also pathogens. And so getting some of this in is a great antioxidant. You get these in capsule forms. We love resveratrol extra, but there's other forms as well. Green superfoods, well, chlorella, spirulina, kelp, wheatgrass, barley grass. We like nanogreens, but there's any of these things that are really, really great because they're just really chock full of nutrients that have a plentiful supply of antioxidants, which are really, really supportive for the blood vessels. Homocysteine, well, here's something we want to think about. So you want to get adequate B vitamins in from the diet. Now, we talked about what homocysteine was in the first class. It's that toxic byproduct of insufficient metabolism of certain amino acids that oftentimes happen when we're not high enough in B vitamins, or we might have a genetic defect. So get adequate Bs. Beans, legumes, dark leafies, whole grains, not flour products, certain meats if they're grass-fed, fish, nutritional yeast. These are all good sources of these B vitamins that can blunt homocysteine, which makes our fat sticky, by the way, which is why you don't want elevated homocysteine. And we talked about what the blood levels ideally should be in the first class. You don't want to eat a lot of B vitamin robbers too, so way too much alcohol, sweets, soda, caffeine, white flour products. They'll strip B vitamins out. And here's some basic forms of the vitamins that you want to get in and about the amounts. This is one of the suggested products that we'll recommend called homocysteine factors on our virtual pharmacy, just as a suggestion, as a cap or two a day. But so long as you eat any of those B vitamins and those recommended sources on the previous slide, you're good. Vitamin K, well, the forgotten nutrient. Well, it's a powerful agent for bone health because it helps stimulate osteocalcin and matrix GLA protein. Those are really nice for binding the minerals in our bones, but it also shows promise for cancer prevention. The big thing here, though, and why I put it in this presentation, is it inhibits vascular calcification. In fact, some people in Germany call it a natural plaque eater. Now, I wouldn't say if you've got 90% occlusion in your coronary arteries just to go eat a bunch of vitamin K. It's not that good, especially for those that are on any blood thinners. And you'll have to work with your doctor very carefully about this. They monitor things called a PT and INR ratio through there. So you don't want your blood too sticky because it can have a tendency to enhance platelet aggregation in through there. So good sources include dark leafies, some fermented cheeses. Know that there's three forms though. There's vitamin K1 from dark greens, really K2. Was from intestinal bacterial production, as well as hard cheeses. Now, these are things I'm talking about, Romano and Parmesan and so forth. Nattokinase is also good, which is a fermented soy extract that is one of the things that's indigenous in Japan, but also is found over here. Kind of stinky. A lot of Westerners don't like eating it, but it is really good. And then there's also vitamin K3, which is synthetic, and that's something that we don't recommend. K2 is the most therapeutic form, and there's subtypes of that, the MK4 and the MK7 forms. About 100 or 200 micrograms, not milligrams, but micrograms per day is a really great thing. And there's a suggested product. Niacin is also good, also known as nicotinic acid. It's vitamin B3, basically. It's been known to reduce cholesterol since, over 50 years. It's metabolized to niacinamide in the body. And the conversion is how niacin exerts its benefit. It actually dilates the blood vessels, and some people get actually what's called a niacin flush. And you can talk to various people about this stuff, but if you're going to consider niacin, or if your doctor's ever prescribed that, they'll usually either do a time-release version or they'll start you off slow and then you ramp up. You don't want to take way too much niacin for too long because it can be a little stressful on the liver, and you got to monitor your liver enzymes periodically. But this is available over the counter as well as by prescription. And there are non-flushing forms like niacinamide and inositol hexanicotinate, but their evidence for cholesterol reduction is not quite as strong. So here's how it works. It reduces production of both LDL and VLDL in the liver, lowers LPA. This is one of the things you might want to really kind of asterisk here mentally, or for those that are taking notes. LPA is one of those LDL subtypes that we've talked about, which is responsible, or actually is the genetic marker that we look at. And there's very few things that will really lower that. In fact, we mentioned that the statin drugs do nothing to lower this. Niacin does. It's one of the very few with this ability that's consistently been shown in the literature to lower this genetic marker. But you got to stay on it, or at least pulse it on and off. It also increases our beneficial HDL and may decrease triglycerides. So that's an interesting side benefit there as well. There's a great book about the 8-week cholesterol cure by Dr. Kowalski. Really was big into niacin. Still is. One report showed, I just put a little clip in here, that niacin reduced arterial plaque, while Zetia, which is another cholesterol medicine, did not. Plant sterols are another part of cholesterol reduction. They're a good thing for plant cell membranes and their structure, and that's when we eat them, we get their benefits as well, found in a variety of fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, and cereals that can lower total cholesterol and LDL. Therapeutic amounts about 500 milligrams to a gram, which is 1,000 milligrams per day. Difficult to get that just with food, so we like to recommend something called lipid support formula, about maybe a capsule or two a day. But plant sterols are very, very nice, very, very generous, very, very healthy for us. Red yeast rice extract. This is kind of like a natural statin drug, if you will. It's not quite the same, but it's made by fermenting a type of yeast, and it's a naturally occurring sources of what they call monocolins. Now, statin drugs are patented based on the type of monocolin that they're going to profile, whereas all of the various monocolins are found in the red yeast rice extract. So they inhibit an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase, if you really want to get detailed about it. Statins work on the same mechanism, but they usually, like I said, just contain one of these monocolins. So red yeast rice extract is really one of the power players for reducing cholesterol. And if you are going to be taking this, you want to make sure, like with a statin drug, that you're going to take a CoQ10, because it can have a mild depleting effect on the body for some people. So quality can be a concern. Always ask for a certificate of analysis. Don't take it with other prescription medicines unless you're talking it with a qualified healthcare professional who's licensed, maybe your medical doctor, your osteopath, your chiropractor, your naturopath, somebody who's licensed to diagnose, really. Side effects are rare if they're taken properly. You want to get a liver blood function panel done where they measure the liver enzymes at least once a year, sometimes more. We get best results with something called biolipitrol, but there's other ones out there as well. The gut-liver connection of inflammation, it's a big thing. So we're looking at things like curcumin and artichoke and milk thistle and a variety of these things like that, as well as the cruciferous vegetables and eggs and beans. These are all the sulfur-containing amino acids. We like to recommend a product called the Liver GI Detox. 2 capsules twice per day is a pretty heavy dose. You might want to start off with a capsule or 2 a day. And for intestinal inflammation, we like well-researched strains of probiotics. Those help assist the gut in the detoxification and also help balance gut floral imbalance, which have a profound influence on cholesterol metabolism for many people. And we talked about this briefly in the first class. So to reduce intestinal inflammation faster, you can consider glutamine or aloe. There's some herbs called slippery elm or deglycerized licorice root and marshmallow root, which are nice too. And here's some various products for that. This is why we like prevention and treatment options as a testing process. As we say, test and don't guess. This is that targeted shot versus just shooting blindly in the dark. Most people just read an infomercial or something and say, well, I'm going to take all of these things, or they hear it from a friend, and you don't really know what your unique chemistry is telling you. So we say test. And that was part of the first class as well. So again, just kind of summing up with some of these stats here, there's over 30 million prescriptions written per year in the U.S. just to lower cholesterol alone. Over 10 billion a year on Lipitor alone. There were some others that were pulled off the market from toxicity. And here's some basic statin drugs in general, and there's other ones as well. Back in 2008, the revenue from these drugs exceeded over 30 billion. So this is a big deal. There was earlier drugs which were cholestyramine and some other things. These were cholesterol binding agents that had side effects like digestive problems and things like that too. But regardless of what you're doing, make sure you contact your physician if whatever prescription might be appropriate in your particular case. As we're getting into the nutritional and the natural options, note again that not all these following options are for everybody. It's not suggested that you take all of these as well. You've got to listen to your own chemistry and review that with your doctor or your prescribing healthcare professional. You look at your constitution and your genes. Everybody's genetics are expressed differently. So to fine-tune your protocol, this is where the information really comes in. And this is talking about reducing our risk-promoting foods and reducing destructive lifestyle choices like smoking and excessive alcohol, exercising, taking only the products that fit our criteria based on really sound advice. So that's kind of a summary of what we're talking about here. So if we're looking at the specifics in through there, if you got elevated triglycerides, VLDL, remnant lipoprotein, again, these things for those of you that might sound this is new, go back and look at the class number 1. RLP, fibrinogen, C-reactive protein. You might want to consider fish oil or some flax oil, the chia seeds, some of these antimicrobial herbs we're mentioning here today, some of these fibrinolytic enzymes or biofilm enzymes are even really stronger, curcumin. If your homocysteine's up, consider a B complex, high in these phosphorylated or active forms of B vitamins, especially B12 and folate. If your insulin level is elevated on a blood test, or if you have a lot of those symptoms for that, consider some extra chromium. We also mentioned fenugreek. So cinnamon, chromium, B vitamins, a lower carbohydrate or lower starchy diet, not necessarily Paleolithic, but just less grains and flours, more fish oil. If your LDL is elevated, especially the bad guys, we talked about LDL type 3 and 4, or the more dense, smaller types of LDL particles in the first class, consider more antioxidants, a Paleolithic or lower flour grain-based diet. Niacin, the red rice yeast, is also great, some extra fiber and sterols. If your HDL is really low, you're good, guys. That's fish oil. Fish oil is big for getting the HDL up. This is a healthy form of our cholesterol. Also niacin, again, a lower starch diet, lower flour, light white flour diet really is what we're talking about here with the paleo stuff and sweets. To convert the small LDL to the larger, more healthy versions of that, again, you can see what's needed here as well. You can see a recurring theme in here. Now, if your LPA is elevated, I've underlined niacin. It's really one of the few that has any significant, credible literature behind it. There is some expertise that say that NAC, also called N-acetylcysteine, and some omega-3s, some other things that can actually help that as well. But I really kind of stick with niacin if your LPA is up. I just haven't seen consistently reproducible evidence clinically or in the literature that says that LPA can be reduced for a lot of folks, anything other than the niacin. Note, the categories 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all helped with exercise. Well, we all know that, but there's the specifics of it. So, summary again, live an anti-inflammatory lifestyle because inflammation is what drives a lot of these pathogenic processes with cardiovascular problems. So eat organic, avoid the processed and packaged foods, watch the refined carbs and eat better fats, get good sleep, de-stress. We talked about toxins, taking quality nutrients. This is one of the reasons why we have the virtual pharmacy recommendations that we're talking about here. Doesn't mean that, again, that's all that you have to do, but we know that they're clinically researched and they work really well. So quality nutrients, don't shop everything out at bargain basement things, whatever's the cheapest. The most expensive products aren't necessarily always the best, and the cheapest products are not necessarily the worst. But in general, you get a lot of times what you pay for. And exercise. So, decreasing your cardiovascular risk through dietary changes. Again, we talk about based on your chemistry and your genes, maybe your GI function, watch your fiber and your sugar. And then that last point down here we'll mention again. In males, testosterone is cardioprotective within reason. A lot of people are taking way too much of it now, especially the aging baby boomers. That can be a cardiac problem. You want it to be kind of within normal limits. Elevated estrogens are also a big problem in guys. So that's, and females, endogenous, or meaning naturally produced estrogens are very cardioprotective. But elevated testosterone can be a risk factor. This is the stuff, the patterns that are oftentimes emerging when we have people that have metabolic syndrome, part of that whole insulin resistance thing. So yes, hormones tie in with cardiovascular stuff. So decreasing it through aerobic exercise, that helps the HDL. Diet and exercise changes alone can help this on 40% average, which is really, really great according to the National Cholesterol and Educational Program. Laboratory testing allows us to know whether exercise will help your lab values too. Is this a battle you can win with exercise? Well, if you got elevated LPA, no, you got to maybe take niacin or talk with your doctor about some other options. So my position is analyzing for individual risk factors using lab testing, specialized lab testing, allows a better assessment for cardiovascular health status. And this really allows us more specific approaches to decrease risk. Prescription medicines do indeed have a benefit for a percentage of the population, but their potential side effects do merit a little bit of caution. Safer, natural, non-toxic, and balancing alternatives should be considered first in many cases. Not every case, but most of them, yeah. Try the natural stuff first. If it doesn't work, then sure. Educating people empowers them to make informed decisions about their healthcare options. And this is half the reason, if not all of it, why we're even doing the webinar here. So, again, if you're getting limited aspects from just a standard lipid panel, as we talked about in class number 1, this little shot here shows, well, there's some forest, and there's a mountain ridge, and maybe a little bit of clouds, maybe a little bit of smoke there. Hey, that doesn't look too bad. Meaning on a standard lipid panel, well, I guess my cholesterol level's not so bad. But with expanded lipid panel, where you can see these different markers of inflammation, you can expand your risk profile a bit. And there's the same picture when you get a little bit more full disclosure. It happens to be Mount St. Helens, a little dramatic, but it illustrates the point. Full risk analysis is really kind of important when it comes to stuff that's the potentially biggest, deadliest killer in the world still. So testing options can include the LPP Plus test by SpectraCell. There's the cholesterol balance test by Boston Heart Diagnostics. The NMR profile, it's the lipoprotein by LabCorp. For those that don't have any insurance, LabCorp owns directlabs.com. You can set up your own account there. There's the CV health profile by Genova Labs. That's gdx.net. There's the comprehensive cardiovascular risk profile by Doctors Data. And if you want to find out what your omega-3 level is, specifically, one of our favorites is the HS, or High Sensitivity Omega-3 Index Test by OmegaQuant Labs. These are just an example of some of the higher profile labs that can give you more expanded testing. It's not exclusive to this, but in class number 1, you saw all the markers that we should look for. So just go through these labs or others, but make sure you get some of these additional markers. You don't want a false sense of security. Here's some recommended books. There's a lot of other ones out there. I just threw these up there because I've read these and I think they're very, very useful. But again, this is an informational resource only. I hope you've enjoyed attending this class and understand that the life you save could be your own. Again, we're talking about the largest cardiovascular problems are the #1 killer in the world. So we encourage you to share this life-saving information with those that you care about. If there's any questions, you can call us at our office or send us an email. It's at the bottom of our website at healthquestforme.com. Have a healthy day.